I knew I wanted to have kids, but I was so focused on my career and just kind of pushing that off. I wanted to wait until I was a little bit more settled.
That is Lakia Holmes. Like many, Lakia was waiting for the right time to start a family. She was deeply focused on a very rewarding and busy career for years before freezing her eggs to preserve her fertility. But after freezing her eggs, she had a realization.
And that's when I really came to the conclusion, like, you know what? I've waited so long to become a mom. What am I continuing to wait for? At that point, I said, you know what? I'm just gonna try this on my own.
And that's exactly what she did. Today, we're gonna get to know more about Lakia and her decision to become a single parent by choice. I'm Dan Bolger with Progeny, and this is Season 7 of This is Infertility. Yes, hello and welcome to a very exciting episode. This is our first episode of the new year, and today we're going to hear Lakia's story of how she decided to become a single parent by choice. There are many reasons why someone might choose to be a single parent by choice. And for Lakia, that choice starts with her rather interesting and sometimes hectic career.
My name is Lakia Holmes. I am a senior producer at Warner Brothers Discovery Sports.
Senior producer for a large sports network is one of those jobs that really keeps you on your toes.
So a day in the life of a sports producer. My job is based a lot on storytelling and working with a lot of different athletes. And so my schedule a lot of times revolves around athletes' schedules when it comes to going on shoots and stuff like that. So my life gets a little hectic. Right now, after we shoot this, I'm going to Citi Field, go to a Mets game, do some stuff there, and then first thing in the morning, hopping on a flight to Atlanta to do a shoot there. I'll only be there roughly about 24, 36 hours, and then rushing back and gonna be sitting in the edit and stuff like that. So that's kind of like how my schedule is.
See, we weren't kidding. She's very busy. But busy or not, she knew she wanted to have kids someday. And as she got a bit older, she decided to take an important step in preserving her future family-building options. She decided to freeze her eggs.
By the time I was 37, getting ready to turn 38, I still wasn't completely ready to have a baby, but I knew I wanted to explore the process of freezing my eggs. And in my mind, I was just going to freeze eggs, keep them there in the freezer, but then still get pregnant naturally. And, hopefully find a partner to, go through that entire process with. I went to my doctor, Dr. Marcy McGuire of RMA of New Jersey, just kind of explore the process. And during the series of tests, I found out that there's probably about a 2% chance of me getting pregnant naturally. So that just kind of changed everything for me.
She had an HSG exam in preparation for freezing her eggs, and it showed that one of her fallopian tubes was completely blocked, and the other one was mostly blocked as well. With these results, it was apparent that her best chance for a future pregnancy would be through IVF.
Hearing that was a shock. It was not what I had in my plans because, again, I was just going in there looking to freeze eggs, and that was going to be pretty much it. So it was at that moment I was like, oh, wow, is this my reality? Because this is not what I had in my plans whatsoever.
This diagnosis cemented Lakia's resolve to move ahead with a round of egg freezing. Freezing eggs is a great way to preserve fertility for anyone who knows that they might need to wait a while before they start trying. But for those like Lakia who know they'll need IVF down the road anyway, it's an especially important option. And her choice was made even simpler by the fact that her employer had Progeny, the fertility benefit that would cover her treatment.
I like to think about what if I didn't have the benefit? Who knows how long it would have taken me to even, start the process, to even just be able to start the conversation, to get a recommendation like, hey, do you know a clinic possibly that I could go to, like where I can just kind of explore my options, stuff like that. So if I didn't have that knowledge at the time, who knows how long it would have taken me to really maybe put two and two together and say, wait, there could be something here that you need to look at. And so for that, I'm grateful that the timing all worked out, because it really then forced me to kind of put a lot of things into perspective.
She was ready to go and freeze her eggs. And for the record, at this point, she wasn't yet thinking of being a single parent by choice.
The plan was, okay, whatever eggs we get from that first retrieval, we'll put those in the freezer and just keep those in the freezer until, hopefully I meet someone and we decide to have a child together.
The egg freezing cycle went smoothly, and she had a good number of eggs that were able to be frozen for future use. And the plan was to keep living, keep working, and at times keep dating, and see where life took her.
You have to change, I guess, in some ways how you approach dating, because you have this extra thing that you have to worry about. And so my approach after hearing the IVF news was that, okay, I have to date with intention and just kind of let them know, maybe not necessarily off the bat, but just to prepare them for the toll that it could take emotionally, financially. So, oftentimes dropping that kind of a bomb when you're on maybe several dates in isn't the easiest, but it's the conversation that needs to happen, because not everyone is kind of prepared for that. And so I think the biggest thing for me is just kind of making them aware, this is what the reality is. And so, it's something that we have to think about.
It was around this time, the period after she had her egg retrieval and froze her eggs, that she had her epiphany.
I really started considering, okay, what's going to be the next step for me? And that's when I really came to the conclusion, you know what? I've waited so long to become a mom. What am I continuing to wait for? I wanted this perfect life for me and for my baby. And so because of that, it's why, I delayed for so long. And then realizing that, you can have a plan in your mind, but someone else, God, have a different plan in mind. And so that was, at that point I said, you know what? I'm just going to try this on my own.
She made up her mind, and she was ready to start her next chapter.
I'd started the process of finding a sperm donor. And that process was so overwhelming. That process, I think, might have even been harder than the process of going through the retrieval. Finding a donor and just going through the searches throughout, the various networks and stuff like that. And it became really overwhelming. So by the time, I guess probably say around January 2022, I was just so anxious and just overwhelmed with the process that I said, I have to kind of take a break. There were moments where I would call my progeny PCA, just bawling, crying, because my levels of anxiety and just, again, the process just going so quickly. It was so overwhelming. And so I'd be on the phone with my PCA sometimes for a good hour at a time. And I feel so bad because I'm sorry, I know you have other people, and that helped a lot, having my PCA, because she, Jenna was her name. Jenna was my first PCA, and Jenna said, you don't have to go through everything at one time. You don't have to just go full speed ahead and just try to accomplish everything in, the next few months. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to just take a beat, take a breath. And I think taking that break in 2022 was probably the best thing I could have done, because I got a chance to be able to do things that I know I really won't be able to do once I have a baby.
I'm really happy Lakia shared that with us. Progeny PCAs are far more than a typical call center or a benefits operator. They're there to help our members with things like what Lakia was going through. We spent so much time and energy worrying about time and making sure we're always moving ahead. But sometimes a pause is needed. For Lakia, the pause was restorative, and in 2023, she was ready to begin the process of finding a sperm donor.
The biggest challenge in finding a sperm donor is finding the perfect donor. Maybe not so much the perfect donor, but the right donor for you. And as a Black woman, that search is harder because there aren't as many Black donors as there are of other races, ethnicities, nationalities. So I kind of had to struggle with, do I continue to try to find a Black donor, or do I look at donors of other races and navigating that aspect of it?
Yes, finding a donor can be especially difficult for those who are searching for a donor of a specific race. And of course, the field only narrows when you take into account genetics. Lakia shared that she is CMV negative, and it was her preference to find a CMV negative sperm donor as well, as using a CMV positive donor could potentially cause a CMV infection in the baby. These are the kinds of things that you have to consider when choosing a donor. So it took longer than she thought it would, but eventually she found a donor.
Everything is falling into place.
Donor in place, Lakia and her doctor decided it was best to do one more round of an egg retrieval, fertilize those eggs, and then have the already previously frozen eggs to rely on down the road if she were to want to have another child.
So out of the 6 eggs, 5 were mature enough to fertilize. Out of the 5, 3 made it to blastocyst stage. Then we did PGT testing, and now I have 2 viable embryos. So went from 6 to 2, and considering my goals to have 2 kids, my nurse was like, we sat out and we did what we wanted to do.
You may be wondering why she and her doctor thought it was wise to do a second egg retrieval rather than just fertilize the eggs that she had from her first retrieval. And I think the results from this second egg retrieval partially demonstrate why. When going through IVF, there's attrition to account for. You might retrieve a number of eggs that you are happy with, but you have no idea really how many will fertilize, how many will reach day 5, how many will be genetically viable, and finally, how many will actually lead to a live birth. And these questions get more and more important when you take into account age. So, considering her age, the best move for her was to do another round. And this way, even if one of those embryos fail to implant, Lakia still has the eggs from her previous cycle to rely on for a second child down the road. Age is also a really good reason to use PGT-A, or genetic testing on the embryos to identify healthy ones.
One of the biggest reasons for me going through the process of PGT testing was because I'm older. I'm 39. So to be able to have that safety net and to, say like, okay, let's be proactive. Let's, get these embryos tested, make sure, so that way we have the best possible outcome when it comes time to implant. And the fact that it's covered by Progeny also just made that process much easier, because it was like, oh, that's covered? Okay, let's do it. Why not? So just even going through that process was made so much easier through having my Progeny benefit, because that was one less expense that I really had to worry about, because I'd asked about the cost of PGT per embryo. And we're probably looking at, I think the number they gave me was maybe around $300 or something per embryo. So to know that cost is significantly less due to my progeny benefit, I said, well, let's do it. Take advantage of having the benefit, because not only am I thinking about it from cost perspective, but just thinking about overall trying to bring viable embryo, to be implanted, to have the most successful chance of actually having the baby. So, doing that was a huge help. And it's something I'm also really, really grateful for.
And that's where Lakia was at the time of our interview. But then some time passed, and then on December 4th, she sent us an email. With Lakia's permission, I'll read some of it for you now. It's been a few months since we last connected, and I wanted to share the news that I'm having a baby. I'm currently 17 weeks and due May 11th, 2024, the day before Mother's Day. What a journey this has been, and it gets more and more real with each ultrasound. I'm so grateful to everyone at Progeny for making this possible. Emails like this one are why we do what we do every day at Progeny. It's made the previous 6 years of doing this podcast so rewarding, and trust me, we love it when we receive words of gratitude from our members. But the reality is that none of this would have happened without her employer choosing to add the Progeny benefit.
If I had the opportunity to sit in front of, whoever it is at Warner Brothers Discovery who, said this is what we're offering our employees, I would just say thank you. Thank you so much, because I don't know if I'd be able to do it without Progeny's benefits.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to thank Lakia for sharing her story with us, and I want to thank you for joining us. If you want to connect with us, you can do so on Instagram at This Is Infertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progeny, you can do so at Progeny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This Is Infertility is brought to you by Progeny. Please remember, this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bolger, and this is Infertility.